In the lively village of Maweni, where the air was always filled with the scent of spices from the bustling market and the sound of drums echoed from vibrant festivals, lived Sife, a young woman whose heart was as warm as the sun that bathed the village every morning. She wasn't like the other girls who dreamed of grand weddings or a life of luxury. Sife had a different kind of dream. She wanted to heal people. She spent her days learning from the village's elder healer, gathering herbs from the fields and mixing remedies with gentle, practiced hands. People admired her kindness, but it was her unwavering determination that truly set her apart. She wasn't just a girl with a soft heart. She was a force, ready to change lives. Kagiso returned to Maweni like a gust of wind from a faraway land, strong, confident, and impossible to ignore. He was the chief's son after all, and his time in the distant city had only made him more magnetic. His voice carried easily over the laughter of the marketplace, and his smile seemed to pull people in without effort. The village buzzed with excitement about his return. Women blushed as he passed, men envied his charm, and elders praised his wisdom. He looked like a man who belonged to a bigger, brighter world than their little village. But for Kagiso, the world felt dim the moment he saw Sife. She wasn't dressed in the finest fabrics, like the women who sought his attention. Her hands were often dirt-streaked from working with herbs, and her hair was tied back carelessly as she focused on her tasks. Yet she was the most radiant person he'd ever seen. It wasn't just her beauty. It was the way she moved with purpose, the way she smiled at the children playing by the river, the way her eyes softened when she spoke to the sick. She wasn't trying to be noticed, and that made her unforgettable. Kagiso found himself seeking her out, drawn to her like the ocean is pulled to the shore. He wandered through the market more often, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. He'd stop by the river, pretending to admire the view while watching her collect herbs. He asked about her, learning everything he could from anyone who would talk. The more he learned, the more he admired her. She wasn't just kind, she was strong, determined, and fiercely independent. Sife noticed him too, of course. How could she not? He was the chief's son, and his presence seemed to light up the village wherever he went. His eyes lingered on her a little longer than they did on anyone else, and his smile always seemed a little warmer when it was meant for her. She couldn't deny the pull she felt in her heart, but she pushed it away. She had dreams bigger than love. She wanted to heal, to save lives, to become something more than a woman admired for her beauty. She wasn't willing to let anyone, not even Kagiso, distract her from that path. But the more she held back, the more Kagiso fell. He wasn't used to hearing no, not from anyone, let alone a girl from a humble family. Her quiet resistance only made her more captivating. Sife wasn't chasing him like the others. She didn't care about his status, his charm, or the life he could offer. She wasn't impressed, and that made him want her even more. Kagiso wasn't falling in love with Sife's beauty. He was falling for her spirit, a spirit he couldn't control, a light he couldn't possess. And with every passing day, his admiration began to twist into something more powerful, more dangerous. She had become the one thing he couldn't have, and that made him determined to make her his, no matter what it took. The Moonlight Festival was the most magical night in Maweni. Lanterns hung high above the village, casting a soft golden glow as laughter and music filled the air. The scent of roasted meats and sweet fruit drifted through the crowd, and dancers moved gracefully to the beat of drums. It was a night where dreams felt possible and love felt inevitable. Kagiso had chosen this night for a reason. He wanted the whole village to see what his heart had already decided. He wanted Sife to be his. As the moon rose high, Kagiso stepped forward, his voice cutting through the noise. The crowd fell silent, curiosity and excitement buzzing between them. He held a small box in his hands, but all eyes were on Sife. Her heart pounded in her chest as she realized what was happening. Kagiso spoke with confidence, his words smooth and heartfelt. He told the village how Sife wasn't just the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. She was the strongest, the kindest, the one who filled his thoughts day and night. He spoke of how he admired her spirit, her passion for healing, and how he couldn't imagine a future without her by his side. Then he opened the box, revealing a dazzling Nzuri gemstone, a rare deep blue jewel said to hold the blessing of everlasting love. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Such a gift was a sign of eternal affection, a symbol reserved for only the most cherished of wives. The villagers stared at Cypher, waiting for her to say yes, waiting for the moment where love would win. But Cypher's heart sank. She looked at the gemstone, at Kagiso's hopeful eyes, and felt the weight of the moment crash down on her. She cared for him, that much she couldn't deny. But love wasn't enough. Sifi wasn't like the other girls, who dreamed of being a chief's wife, draped in fine clothes, and admired from afar. She had her own dreams, dreams of healing the sick, of becoming a woman known for her skill and compassion, not for who she married. Her voice trembled, but she spoke clearly. She thanked Kagiso for his kindness, for his affection, but she couldn't accept. A painful hush fell over the crowd. Whispers began to stir. Saifish didn't meet his eyes again, afraid of the hurt she might see. She turned and walked away, leaving Kagiso standing there, the gemstone still shining in his hands. His heart didn't just break, it shattered. He wasn't used to hearing no. He wasn't used to rejection, especially not in front of the whole village. Embarrassment burned inside him, twisting into something dark and unrecognizable. He had laid his heart bare for Saifi, and she had rejected him like he was nothing. The warmth he once felt for her began to curdle into something else entirely. The man who once admired her strength now saw it as defiance. Love, once soft and tender, turned sharp and bitter. She wasn't just the woman he loved anymore. She became the woman who humiliated him. His heart, bruised and aching, couldn't let go. He told himself that if he couldn't have her willingly, he would find another way. Sifi didn't realize it yet, but by rejecting Kagiso, she hadn't just broken his heart. She had awakened something far more dangerous. The boy who loved her was gone. In his place stood a man consumed by obsession, and he wasn't done with her yet. The days after the Moonlight Festival felt different in Mwaini. The air seemed heavier, and the warm smiles Cypher once received began to fade. At first, she thought it was her imagination. People were busy, distracted, or so she told herself. She focused on her work, tending to the sick, gathering herbs, and preparing remedies like she always had. Healing was her purpose, and no awkward glances or hushed whispers could change that. But the whispers grew louder. Slowly, subtly, Kagiso began planting seeds of doubt among the villagers. He never spoke against Sifi directly. That would be too obvious. Instead, he let his words drip like poison into the ears of the people, disguised as concern. He would sigh and mention how strange it was that some of Cypher's patients weren't getting better as quickly as they used to. He wondered aloud if maybe she was distracted or worse, careless. After all, she had turned down his offer to become the chief's wife. If she didn't value that honor, what else might she take for granted? People began to listen. If the chief's son, wise and worldly after his time in the city, questioned Cypher's abilities, maybe they should too. It started small. A mother choosing another healer for her child's cough. A farmer asking for a different remedy for his aching back. But small doubts, like embers, can grow into flames. Soon, the change was undeniable. Fewer people came to Cypher's hut. Those who did looked at her differently, their eyes filled with uncertainty. Some asked the same question over and over. Are you sure this will work? They no longer trusted her word. And when a child, already weak with fever, failed to recover despite her best efforts, the whispers turned to accusations. Maybe Sifa isn't as skilled as we thought, they murmured. Maybe she was never a true healer at all. Cypher felt the shift, but she held on to hope. She believed in her work, in the remedies she had studied for years. People were scared, sickness spread easily, and fear made them act irrationally. She told herself it would pass, that the village would remember who she really was. She kept her head high and her hands steady, unaware of the web Kagiso was weaving behind her back. Kagiso watched from a distance, satisfied. He still felt the sting of her rejection, but now it was buried beneath something colder. He told himself this wasn't about revenge. It was about teaching Cypher a lesson. She thought she didn't need him, that she could survive without his love and protection. He would prove her wrong. He would make her feel the same helplessness he felt when she walked away from him. Suitor didn't see it coming. She didn't realize that the man who once admired her was now the reason her world was slowly unraveling. Each day, the village she loved seemed to pull further away from her, and she couldn't understand why. She believed in the goodness of people. She believed in Kagiso's kindness, even if they were no longer close. She never imagined he could be the shadow lurking behind her downfall. The darkness had only begun to creep in, and Suitor, still hopeful, had no idea how far it would spread. Kagiso's heart had twisted so far from love that it no longer recognized the warmth it once held. His hurt festered, and his obsession deepened. He couldn't stand to see Suitor continue living her life with her head held high, untouched by his pain. The whispers he planted had worked, but it wasn't enough. He wanted to break her spirit completely, to make her feel the rejection and humiliation he felt that night under the moonlight. He turned to his father, Chief Kwame, a man who valued order and tradition above all else. Kagiso knew exactly what to say to bend his father's will. He spoke carefully, planting doubt like seeds in fertile soil. He painted a picture of Suitor's rejection, not as a personal slight, but as a disrespect to the village itself. He claimed that her refusal to become the chief's wife had disturbed the balance of Mweini, offending the spirits who watched over them. She thinks she's above the chief's family, Kagiso murmured to his father, above the ancestors' will. Maybe that's why her patients are suffering. Maybe that's why the village feels uneasy. Chief Kwame listened, his expression heavy with concern. The village had been restless after all. People whispered of bad omens, crops wilting too soon, cattle falling sick, and the river running lower than before. Kagiso's words didn't sound like bitterness to him. They sounded like warning signs. It wasn't long before a strange illness swept through Mweini. It came without warning, striking the young and old alike. Fevers burned high, and coughs rattled deep in the chests of even the strongest villagers. No remedy seemed to work. Kagiso seized the moment, his voice loud and certain. He told the people that this wasn't an ordinary sickness. It was a punishment. He claimed the spirits were angry, not at the village, but at Suitor. He reminded them of her rejection, how she turned away his love, a union that could have united the village under strength and prosperity. He made them believe that her refusal wasn't just a rejection of him, it was a rejection of tradition, of the ancestors themselves. Fear took root in the villagers' hearts. Desperation turned their uncertainty into belief. They wanted someone to blame, someone to hold accountable for their suffering. Suitor, once loved and admired, became that target. Kagiso pressed his father harder, insisting that allowing Suitor to continue her healing only brought more misfortune. He spoke of curses and dark spirits, convincing Chief Kwame that banning her from practicing medicine was the only way to save their people. The chief, desperate to restore peace and health to his village, finally agreed. The next morning, a decree was made. Suitor was no longer allowed to heal. Anyone who sought her remedies would face punishment. Her hut, once a place of comfort and hope, became a place to avoid. Suitor stood frozen as the news spread. Her heart ached, not just from the ban, but from the way the villagers looked at her now, like she was a stranger, a threat. People she once called friends wouldn't meet her eyes. Mothers pulled their children away when she walked by. She heard their whispers, sharp as knives. She brought this on us. She defied the chief's son. Now the spirits punish us all. Maybe she was never a true healer. Her vibrant home, once filled with laughter and light, now felt cold and hollow. Her herbs withered, untouched. The children who used to run to her for scraped knees and playful hugs no longer came near. She wandered the market, but no one spoke to her. Even the air felt different, heavier, suffocating. Suitor didn't understand how it had come to this. She had only followed her heart, held on to her dream, and stayed true to herself. How could love, or the rejection of it, turn into something so cruel? Kagiso watched from a distance, his eyes dark and unreadable. He told himself this was justice, that she deserved this for humiliating him. But deep down, a part of him still burned, not with love, but with the aching truth that no matter how much he destroyed her life, she still wouldn't be his. Days in Mawini blurred into a lonely haze for Saifi. Her once warm, welcoming home felt like a prison now. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional murmur of villagers passing by, whispers that cut deeper than any wound. She still woke up early, her hands moving out of habit, sorting herbs that no one would ask for. Her heart ached, but she couldn't stop. Healing wasn't just what she did, it was who she was. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in streaks of orange and purple, a stranger wandered into the village. His clothes were dusty from the road, and his eyes carried the weight of someone who had seen many places and many stories. His name was Tafari, a herbalist from a distant land. He came seeking nothing more than shelter and rest, but what he found was a village wrapped in fear and pain. Tafari noticed the way the villagers moved, tense and wary. He noticed the way they avoided a particular hut, their eyes flickering with judgment. And then he saw her, Cypher, sitting outside her empty home, staring at the setting sun with a look of quiet sadness. Something about her struck him. He saw not a cursed woman, but a soul burning with untapped strength. He watched the way her hands absent-mindedly sorted herbs, her fingers moving with the skill of someone born to heal. He didn't see failure or weakness. He saw a healer whose light had been unfairly dimmed. That night, Tafari approached her. His voice was gentle but steady. He asked her about the village, about the people, about what had happened. Sifi hesitated, unsure if she could trust anyone anymore. But something in his eyes, calm and knowing, made her speak. She told him everything: the rejection, the rumors, the ban, the way her people, her friends, had turned their backs on her. Tafari listened without interruption. When she finished, he didn't offer pity. Instead, he smiled softly. "They've taken your voice, Sifi," he said, "but they can't take your purpose. You are a healer. No one, not even a chief's son, can change that." He told her about his travels, about distant lands where medicine wasn't just about herbs and remedies, but about understanding the spirit and the body as one. He spoke of ancient techniques, long forgotten by most healers, that could cure illnesses beyond ordinary remedy. He saw potential in Saifi, not just to heal again, but to become greater than she ever imagined. "If you're willing to learn," he said, his voice low but certain, "I'll teach you." For the first time in what felt like forever, Sifi felt a spark of hope. Her people might have turned against her, but her heart still beat with the same fire it always had. She wasn't finished yet. She couldn't be. Every night, under the cover of darkness, Sif trained with Tafari. He taught her how to mix herbs in ways she'd never known, how to read the signs of an illness before it fully took hold, how to draw strength from the earth itself. She learned to listen, not just to the body, but to the soul. She learned faster than Tafari expected, her determination pushing her beyond exhaustion. Each bruise, each failed attempt, only made her more determined. Saifi no longer cared about proving Kagiso wrong or winning back the villagers' trust. She wasn't doing this for them anymore. She was doing it because it was who she was. The village might not believe in her now, but they still needed her, whether they realized it or not. She wasn't the same Saifi who once dreamed of being a simple village healer. That girl was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, and more powerful than anyone could have imagined. Kagiso thought he had won. Sif's light had dimmed, her reputation was in ruins, and the village that once adored her now looked at her with fear and suspicion. But despite everything, she didn't crumble. He watched from a distance, expecting her to wither away, to come to him begging for forgiveness, for safety, for him, but she never did. Instead, he saw something else, something that sent a cold twist through his stomach. He saw her getting stronger. Whispers started to circulate again, not the ones Kagiso carefully planted, but new ones. People spoke of seeing Sifi at night, moving quietly beyond the village, meeting with the strange herbalist who had wandered into Mawini. Some claimed they saw her gathering herbs they didn't recognize. Others said she spoke to the wind like the old healers from forgotten legends. Kagiso's heart burned with a mix of fear and fury. She wasn't broken. She was rising. One night, he followed her. The moonlight barely touched the earth and the village was asleep, but Saifi moved with purpose. He watched her meet Tafari in the shadows of the hills. He saw them mixing herbs, practicing movements he didn't understand. She looked different, stronger, more confident. The girl he once loved, the one who smiled shyly in the marketplace, was gone. In her place was a woman who stood taller, whose eyes burned with determination. It wasn't fair. She was supposed to need him. She was supposed to realize she couldn't survive without him. His anger boiled over, and he stepped out from the darkness. His voice cut through the night like a blade. Saif. She froze for a moment, then turned to face him. For the first time since that night at the Moonlight Festival, they stood face to face. "You've been busy," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Learning things you shouldn't. I should have known you wouldn't stay quiet." Saifi didn't flinch. She stared at him, her voice steady. "I'm doing what I was meant to do, what I've always done, help people, even the ones who turned against me." Kagiso stepped closer, his expression hardening. "I'm giving you one last chance, Saifi. Come back to me. Be mine. I can make all of this go away. The whispers, the ban, the shame. I can fix it. You and I, we can still have the life I promised you." For a moment there was silence. The wind rustled through the trees. Saifi took a breath, her voice clear and unwavering. "No, Kagiso, I will never belong to you. I am not a prize to be won. I am not yours. I never was." Kagiso's face twisted with rage. His pride shattered all over again. He had given her a chance, a way out, and she threw it back in his face, just like before. But this time, he wouldn't let her walk away. "If you won't choose me," he hissed, "then I'll take everything from you." The next morning, the village woke to the sound of shouting. Soldiers, acting on Kagiso's orders, stormed Tafari's small camp. He was dragged through the village, his hands bound, accused of sorcery and poisoning Maweni with his foreign magic. Kagiso stood by his father's side, his expression cold and unreadable. He told the people that Tafari was the reason for their suffering, that the sickness and misfortune were his doing. It was all a lie, a twisted, cruel lie, but fear made people believe it. Saifi watched helplessly as her mentor, the man who reignited her strength, was taken away. Tafari didn't fight. He looked at her one last time, giving her a small, knowing nod as if to say, "Keep going. Don't stop now." Kagiso met Saifi's eyes across the crowd. He expected to see her broken. He expected to see her surrender, but all he saw was fire. The battle wasn't over yet. The illness that had started as whispers and worried glances became a raging storm that no one could stop. Children grew weaker, elders coughed until they couldn't anymore, and even the strongest hunters began to collapse. Kagiso, despite his charm and influence, couldn't control the fear spreading through the village like wildfire. He had promised the people safety, strength, and prosperity, but all they had now was sickness and loss. He appointed new healers, ones who praised his leadership and spoke against Saifi. They brewed remedies and muttered blessings, but nothing worked. The fevers raged on, and the villagers' hope started to die alongside their loved ones. Even Chief Kwame looked older and more burdened with each passing day, his faith in Kagiso quietly unraveling. Among the sick was Amina, Kagiso's younger sister, the one person who could soften his hardened heart. She was kind and innocent, untouched by her brother's cruelty. But even she wasn't spared. The fever hit her fast and hard, leaving her frail and barely breathing. The village's best healers tried everything they knew, but nothing helped. Amina drifted closer to death with each sunset. News of her condition reached Saifi, hidden on the outskirts of the village. Despite everything, the betrayal, the hatred, the lies, she couldn't ignore the pain of her people. She couldn't ignore Amina. The little girl had once followed her around, asking endless questions about plants and remedies, eyes full of wonder. Saifi remembered the laughter they shared, how Amina would pick flowers and braid them into her hair, calling her the bravest healer. That night, under the cover of darkness, Saifi crept into the village. Her heart pounded with every step, knowing that if she was caught, Kagiso wouldn't show mercy. But fear didn't matter anymore. The people needed her. whether they admitted it or not. She moved like a shadow, quiet and swift, carrying small vials of the new remedy she had perfected with Tafari's teachings. She left them outside the homes of the sickest villagers, placing the last one at Amina's doorstep. For a moment, she paused, looking at the girl's pale, fragile face through the window. Her heart tightened. She whispered a silent prayer and disappeared into the night. By dawn, the village woke to a miracle. Amina, who had been barely clinging to life, was awake. Her fever was gone. Her cheeks, once hollow and pale, now flushed with colour. She sat up, smiling weakly, and called for her mother. The news spread like wildfire. Other families found their loved ones recovering too, the ones who had been given Sifa's secret remedy. The villagers gathered, buzzing with hope and confusion. They remembered the vials, the mysterious cures that appeared overnight. Whispers turned into questions. Who had left them? Where had this cure come from? And then the truth began to dawn on them. The only person who could create such powerful medicine was the very woman they had cast out. The same woman Kagiso called a curse. The crowd murmured, uneasy now. Their faith in Kagiso, once unshakable, started to crack. If Saifi was truly cursed, how could she have healed Amina, his own sister? And why would she still try to save them after all they had done to her? Doubt settled over the village like a heavy fog. The people began to realize that maybe, just maybe, they had been wrong. And if they were wrong about Sifa, what else had Kagiso lied about? The village buzzed with uneasy whispers. Amina's miraculous recovery was undeniable proof that someone powerful and compassionate still looked after Maweni. And it wasn't Kagiso or his appointed healers. Suspicion grew thicker with each passing day, and the once blind loyalty the villagers had for him began to crumble. People started talking, wondering if they had been wrong to turn against Saifi. But it wasn't until Tafari's unexpected return that the truth finally shattered Kagiso's carefully built web of lies. Late one evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, a figure emerged from the forest. Dirty, bruised, but very much alive, Tafari stumbled into the heart of the village. Gasps filled the air as the villagers gathered, eyes wide in disbelief. He was supposed to be gone forever, imprisoned, or worse. Yet here he stood, defying every expectation. Kagiso, who had been addressing a crowd near the chief's hut, froze. His face paled as Tafari's voice rang out, clear and unwavering. He spoke of everything, how Kagiso had him arrested under false charges, how Saifi had trained tirelessly in secret to become a healer stronger than anyone had imagined, and most painfully, how Kagiso had fueled the village's fear with lies to punish Saifi for rejecting his love. The crowd fell into stunned silence. The people looked at Kagiso with new eyes, not with admiration, but with betrayal and anger. Mothers whose children had suffered, families who had lost loved ones, and friends who once believed Kagiso's words now saw him for what he truly was. Sifa, who had been watching quietly from the edge of the gathering, stepped forward. Her once gentle eyes now held the strength of someone who had endured and risen above it all. She didn't need to say much. Her presence alone spoke louder than words. She looked at the villagers, the same people who had turned against her, and instead of anger, they saw compassion. "I never stopped caring for you," she said softly, her voice carrying through the crowd. "Even when you believed the worst of me, I still wanted to heal you, to heal our home." The villagers, overwhelmed with guilt and admiration, bowed their heads. They realized they had been wrong, horribly, unforgivably wrong, and Kagiso, once their shining future leader, was the one who had truly poisoned their village. Chief Kwame stepped forward, his face etched with sorrow. He looked at his son, the boy he had once been so proud of, and shook his head. The weight of disappointment hung heavy in the air. "You were meant to protect this village, Kagiso, not destroy it for your own pride," the chief said, his voice thick with grief. "You have betrayed your people. You have betrayed me." Kagiso tried to speak, but no words came. He had no excuses left, no charm to save him this time. Chief Kwame took a deep breath, his decision clear. "You are no longer my successor. You will not lead this village. The people deserve a leader who heals, not one who destroys." The village watched in stunned silence as Kagiso's shoulders slumped in defeat. His power, his title, his future, all gone in an instant. And as the sun set over Mweni, the people didn't look to him anymore. Their eyes turned to Cypher, the true healer, the true hero. The girl they once cast out was now the woman they would follow, not out of fear, but out of respect and hope. Kagiso was no longer the proud, charming man who once stood tall before the village. His shoulders sagged under the weight of his own choices, his eyes hollow with regret. The people who once cheered his name now looked through him as if he were a ghost. His father's words still echoed in his mind, cutting deeper than any sword ever could. You are no longer my successor. Everything he had built, everything he had dreamed of, had crumbled into nothing, and it was his own doing. For days, he wandered the village outskirts, watching from afar as Cypher tended to the sick, her touch bringing comfort and healing where his lies had brought only fear and suffering. The villagers now turned to her, their hearts filled with gratitude instead of doubt. Children laughed when they saw her coming. Mothers welcomed her into their homes with warm smiles, and even the elders bowed their heads in respect. Cypher glowed with a quiet strength, the kind he once admired and now realized he had tried so desperately to control. One evening, as the sky bled into brilliant shades of orange and purple, Kagiso finally found the courage to face her. He found her by the river, gathering herbs, her hands moving with the ease of someone who knew her purpose. His voice trembled when he spoke. Cypher, he began, barely above a whisper, please, I need to talk to you. She didn't turn around immediately. For a moment, he thought she might ignore him, but then she stood, her back straight and strong, and faced him. Her eyes, once filled with warmth and affection for him, now held only calm resolve. I was wrong, Kagiso admitted, his voice raw with emotion. I let my pride poison me. When you rejected me, I didn't see the truth. I didn't see you. I only saw my own pain. I hurt you, and I hurt this village. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm begging for it anyway. His voice broke, and his eyes glistened. I loved you, Cypher, but I see now that love isn't supposed to control or punish. I'm so sorry. Cypher's gaze softened, but it didn't waver. She stepped closer, and for a moment, Kagiso dared to hope. I forgive you, Kagiso, she said gently, and his heart lifted, but only for a second. Not because you deserve it, but because I refuse to carry the weight of your mistakes on my soul. Kagiso's chest tightened. He wanted to believe this was the moment things could go back to how they were, back to when she laughed with him in the markets, when he dreamed of a future with her by his side. But the truth was clear now, undeniable and final. I loved you once, Cypher continued, her voice steady but kind. But the man I loved wouldn't have done what you did. That man is gone. She took a breath, her eyes filled with something deeper than anger, understanding. I am not the same girl you tried to possess, Kagiso. I am not yours. I am mine, and my path is no longer beside you. Her words, though spoken softly, landed with the weight of 1,000 stones. Kagiso's knees felt weak, his throat tight with the ache of knowing he had lost more than her love. He had lost her trust, her friendship, and any place in her future. She didn't look back as she walked away, her head held high, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows over the village, Kagiso finally understood. This wasn't his story anymore, it was hers, and she would rise without him. The village of Mweni felt different now, lighter, warmer, as if a dark cloud had finally lifted. The once fearful whispers that used to follow Cypher had turned into words of admiration and gratitude. The same people who once shunned her now sought her out, not only for her healing but for her wisdom and strength. They no longer saw a cursed outcast. They saw a woman who had endured their cruelty and still saved them without asking for anything in return. The elders gathered in the village square, where Chief Kwame stood before his people. His face was lined with the weight of everything that had happened, but his voice was steady when he spoke. Cypher, he began, his eyes meeting hers with something that looked like both pride and regret. Our village owes you more than we can ever repay. You stood strong when we turned against you. You healed us when we believed you were our curse. Today, Mweni stands because of your courage and compassion. From this day forward, you are our official healer, our guardian of health and hope. The villagers erupted into cheers. their voices filling the air like the songs of 1,000 birds. Children ran to her with flowers, and women embraced her with tears in their eyes. Sifi felt her heart swell, not with pride, but with peace. She had dreamed of this moment once, to heal, to help, to be accepted. But now, it wasn't acceptance she needed. She had found something greater, her purpose. Tafari watched from a distance, a soft smile tugging at his lip. He had known from the moment he met Sifi that she was destined for more than the life of an ordinary healer. She wasn't just meant to heal the sick, she was meant to heal the broken spirit of her people. As the celebration settled, Tafari approached her, his voice calm and warm. "My work here is done," he said. "You no longer need a teacher, Sifi. You've become more than I could have ever taught you." Her eyes glistened, but she nodded, understanding that his journey wasn't meant to end in Mweni. He was a wanderer, a healer of distant lands, and just like she had found her place, he would continue to find his. "Thank you," she said softly, "for believing in me when no one else did." Tafari smiled, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Needs more healers, Sifi. Teach others. Share what you know. Let no village suffer the way this one." With a final nod, he turned and disappeared into the horizon, his silhouette fading with the setting sun. The next morning, as dawn painted the sky in shades of gold and rose, Sife stood at the edge of the village. The sunlight warmed her face, and she felt the weight of everything, the pain, the betrayal, the heartbreak, finally lift. She wasn't a victim anymore. She wasn't the girl who begged for acceptance or feared rejection. She was Cypher, the healer of Mweni, the woman who stood against cruelty and chose compassion. The village had once tried to break her, but now, because of her, it had been rebuilt stronger than before. And as the sun rose higher, casting light over her home, Saifi knew this was only the beginning. She wasn't just a healer, she was a legend in the making. If you loved Saifi's powerful journey from heartbreak to hero, don't forget to like, comment, and share this story with your friends. Hit that subscribe button for more emotional, inspiring, and unforgettable stories. And let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Cypher's place? Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for more incredible stories coming soon.